everybody. Happy Friday and yay to the end of the week. So it's been a long week already, Stephanie. I don't know about you, but definitely on my end.
Yeah, me
So
too.
anyway, let's dive into some news. My head is spinning with all the back and forth court cases with the Trump admin. And on Wednesday, the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled that his tariffs are now illegal, and they're claiming his authority to impose tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act cannot be done without approval from Congress. So the Trump admin immediately filed an appeal. And then yesterday, the U.S. Court of Appeals paused the lower court's ruling and they granted Trump's request for an administrative stay while they consider the motion. So I don't think that's a real answer yet. And I think Trump will escalate it to the Supreme Court if it needs to go there, like pretty much everything else. And from what I read, he's also looking at other alternate legal routes to reimpose tariffs, including invoking specific sections of different trade laws to try and use tariffs under different justifications. But once again, here we are with another court case.
I was so pissed when I heard this because it's like basically nothing the American people voted for is being implemented. Like nothing.
Mhm.
They're trying to stop every single move. And I would, in the past have said, well, that's just the way it works. But look at what happened over the last 4 years with Biden. He could do whatever the hell he wanted. He could let
Right.
millions of people in our country, no court stopped that. No,
Mhm.
it's just completely crazy that now we're trying to get things back to where they were before Biden. And they're not going to let Trump like uphold the law. It's just absolutely insane. And I feel like it's all a tactic to just keep dragging this out and stall until the next election. And I guess
Yeah.
the little bit of hope that I have is that we've seen the Supreme Court move very quickly with these other cases. So maybe that will be the same and they will back him. I don't know, but I don't really trust the Supreme Court either because they've done all kinds of wonky things. And the other thing is like the tariffs are working. So all the fear mongering about, the high prices and a recession, it hasn't come to fruition. And I've seen the opposite happen. We see inflation's the lowest it's been in 4 years. The stock market is doing well. We're bringing in billions of dollars every month from the tariffs. So it's like the plan is working. Let's just leave it alone and let it be. But then the other thing that's pissing me off is you have Walmart that is publicly saying they're not going to absorb the cost of the tariffs and instead they're going to pass it down to their customers because they just don't make enough profit. That was their whole case. Okay, we're talking about a company that made over $14 billion last year alone. They have a 9% year over year increase. And so not only do you have Trump calling them out on it and telling them, no, you should absorb the cost, but even their former CEO, Bill Simon, is saying that, the company has great profit margins and they could absorb some of these increased costs. So, needless to say, I'm not going to be shopping at Walmart just for the principle of it. I think it's absolutely insane that they're just outright saying, nope, we're going to raise prices on our customers, even though we make all this money. Clearly, they're not an America First company. And now they've just pissed off a lot of people with, you know, just letting the customers deal with it.
It's letting the customers or letting the taxpayers, that's basically what everything comes down to because it's either big business or big pharma or big food. Like everything falls on us. And that, which leads me to something I wanted to bring up because on Wednesday, we talked about last week's congressional report that showed that the Biden admin deliberately withheld the negative side effects of the COVID vaccine from the public for months, especially the myocarditis risk for young people. Excuse me. And then they just continue to push the vaccine. So yesterday, Rep. Mark Green from Tennessee, he once again reintroduced the Vaccines in Trial and Liability, or VITAL Act. And I use the term reintroduced because this is not the first time that he's pushed for liability protections to be removed from vaccine manufacturers. And the caveat is if they're found to have fraudulent or misleading statements, or if they conceal information during vaccine clinical trials. But he initially introduced this legislation last year in May of 2024. But as usual with our clown show theater performance Congress, the bill never made it past the committee stage, which basically reaffirms to me that these people are all in bed with the pharmaceutical companies, because why else wouldn't you want accountability for drug manufacturers lying to the American public? So here we are a year later. And Green's trying to get this legislation back on the table. And if it does get approved by Congress, it would give Health and Human Services, or specifically, I think, to the secretary, so to RFKJ, it would give the authority to revoke liability protections and ensure that these pharmaceutical companies are held accountable and liable for any kind of deceptive practices related to vaccine development and approval. This would also allow individuals who suffer adverse effects from vaccines to pursue civil lawsuits against the manufacturers. And this isn't just the COVID vaccine. This bill could actually reverse the National Childhood Vaccine Act of 1986. And I guess that's the legislation that initially gave vaccine manufacturers immunity against vaccine injuries. And I really didn't know much about it, so I asked our GPT. And I guess it was the result, or the Vaccine Act resulted in the creation of something called the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. So what is that? And here's where I'm tying it into what you were saying before. This is a taxpayer-funded program to pay out vaccine injuries. So pharma companies aren't paying. They're making billions of dollars, just like Walmart's making billions of dollars and passing the buck on to, the customers. Well, that's what Big Pharma is doing with taxpayers, because we are the ones who are literally footing the bill when shit goes wrong. And like, how does this make any sense? How have they been getting away with this shit for almost 40 years? And we've talked before about, like, with the COVID vaccine, you can't even make an injury claim under this VCIP because the COVID vaccine wasn't added to the routine childhood vaccine schedule until what, like 2 or 3 years after COVID was
Yeah.
around?
Hmm.
So that took me down a whole other rabbit hole of something called the Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program. That was established in 2005 under the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act, or the PrEP Act. And I have heard of the PrEP Act in context of COVID before, but I didn't know much about that either. So I asked our GPT that too. And this is the act that people have been using for COVID claims because it's the only route for people to receive any kind of limited compensation for serious injuries or death related to the COVID vaccine. And I think it's also been used for like anthrax vaccine injuries in the military and other viral drugs that have been used during declared emergencies. But again, who pays for these claims? It's us, the taxpayers, not the pharmaceutical companies, because the funding comes from the Covered Countermeasure Process Fund, which is a federally administered fund managed by Health Resources and Services Administration, a government entity, and the money is all appropriated by Congress. And the reason I want to elaborate on this is because I didn't know anything about it. And I think that's on purpose because I don't think most Americans know anything about it. So when the CICP makes decisions about vaccine injuries, everything is done behind closed doors. There are no public hearings, they don't publish any of their decisions, and there are no appeals to the courts. Like, we don't know anything that's going on. And I had our GPT look up statistics, and as of 2024, fewer than 10% of claims have been compensated because the standard of proof is too high and the process takes forever. And the only payouts that are made are for like bare minimum medical costs and lost wages. There's zero pain and suffering or anything. So if we look at COVID specifically, there were over 12,000 COVID vaccine injury claims made to the CICP, and only a handful of those were paid out. We've talked about VAERS before, the system where you log in and you can log the adverse effects. Well, they had tens of thousands of serious adverse effects logged by people. And where has the money been going? Well, since 2022, the CICP has received a total of $19 million in direct appropriations. So that's just over the past 3 years. As of this month of this year, they have paid out 6 million for 34 COVID claims. And I know I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but I want to look at the specific numbers because there were almost 14,000 COVID claims that were filed with the CICP. Again, only 34 of those were compensated to the tune of $6 million. 35 claims were found eligible, but pending benefits determination. Over 4,100 were denied for reasons that included missed filing deadlines, or the requested medical records weren't submitted, or the standard of proof wasn't met. But here's the crazy part, Stephanie. The average payout per person was around $4,000.
That's not even enough to cover their attorney expenses for filing the
Right.
claim.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And these are claims, $4,000 for conditions like myocarditis, for anaphylaxis, for Guillain-Barré syndrome. People receive between $1,000 and $5,500. So that 4,000 was an average, like not even across the board. There was one claim for $370,000, and I didn't get any details on exactly what that was. But aside from that one claim, the rest all fall in that under 5,500 category. So a government accountability office report from June of last year showed a total of $419,000 being paid for COVID related injuries. And the average time for the CICP to complete the eligibility check and the medical review for each claim was 2 fucking years. Okay. So we're talking millions of dollars and only 419,000 paid. So where has the bulk of the money gone? Where do you think it's gone?
Admin,
Yes, correct. Admin. $9
of
million
course.
dollars has gone to administrative costs, which is what, 1.5 times the cost of payouts that just went to administration. And again, this is all taxpayer money with zero accountability, zero liability on the pharmaceutical companies. And again, I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but since these congressional reports have been released, I've just been going down the rabbit hole of the COVID investigations, and it's been incredibly eye-opening. So I really hope this bill makes it out of committee, and I want to see who votes for it and who doesn't, because that right there will be a clear reveal as to who's in bed with Big Pharma. And unfortunately, this bill will not do anything to change the CICP rules because it's only targeting fraudulent behavior by vaccine manufacturers for concealing data or lying during clinical trials. So this is like a first step in my mind. Like this should not be the be all and end all. These pharmaceutical companies need to be held liable and they need to be paying for vaccine injuries, not the American public.
It's just so crazy to me, the gaslighting, because here RFK has been calling it out about these vaccines, and we need to really understand if they're safe or not. And what have we heard from everyone? They're absolutely safe. They're 100% safe. They're totally safe. There's nothing unsafe about them. Well, if that's true, then why do we have an entire program that the government pays for to compensate people who were injured because it wasn't safe? I mean, that right there proves RFK's point, number one. But number two, like, I wish I could go back in time and be a fly on the wall to see how this whole thing went down. Like, to me, this sounds like some crazy government conspiracy. Like, we want you to make this vaccine that we're going to inject in every single kid in America. And then the pharmaceutical companies had to have said, that's too dangerous. We're going to get sued. And so then they said, oh, don't worry, we'll protect you from that. I mean,
Yeah.
how, if it wasn't dangerous, they wouldn't need this in the first place. So this whole thing just proves everything RFK has been saying is actually legitimate. And they've been freaking gaslighting us for all of these years, telling us it's completely safe to give your kid whatever it is, 76 vaccines or whatever the schedule is now.
Right.
Oh man, this pisses me off. And not to mention, these companies make billions in profit, like pure profit every year. They can afford to pay out these claims when they injure somebody. So, what the hell? But this led me to like this whole other rabbit hole on the changes that are going to be coming to the pharmaceutical industry very soon. Like they're already happening. So, the US Department of Energy, they announced the upcoming launch of this new supercomputer named Doudna. And I guess that's after the Nobel laureate Jennifer Doudna. So, this ties into pharmaceuticals, so stay with me. This is scheduled to go online next year at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. And it's a supercomputer that's basically meant to advance like AI and scientific research. And it's going to help 11,000 researchers across like all these different scientific disciplines, including chemistry, physics, biology, energy sciences. And it's engineered to handle very complex simulations and large scale data analysis. So they're projecting that this is going to result in huge breakthroughs in genomics, and it's going to accelerate our understanding of disease and develop all of these like targeted therapies. And then it's also going to be focusing on fusion energy, material sciences, drug discovery, like everything in the scientific world. And you have the NVIDIA CEO, Jensen Huang, saying that this is going to compress years of discovery into days. Like it's completely going to change everything. And so I was looking into it, and these supercomputers can model trillions of chemical interactions in just seconds. So the whole like drug discovery R&D process is going to be completely shortened, and you're not going to need all of the time and funding that you do now to create something. So, what used to take decades and billions of dollars is going to happen literally in days with AI and quantum computing. So, this made me think of the conversation we had the other day where we were talking about the South Korean researchers and how they
Mhm.
discovered a way to like reverse cancer cells. That was why we almost got banned on TikTok again.
Right.
And, we were saying like Big Pharma is never going to allow it because how do they make their profits? From selling cancer drugs, not curing cancer. They would lose all their profit. So, my whole thing with this quantum computing and supercomputers is this technology is so massive. Will Big Pharma be able to just like sweep all this new research under the rug? I don't think they will. I think this is going to be a tipping point. And I think we will see what we saw in like the 80s and 90s, where cigarette companies, they were the big thing. They were the most profitable companies, and they became nearly obsolete. Well, what did they do? They took all their cash reserves and they bought up food companies, right? Like they pivoted to survive. And I predict we're going to see the same thing in pharma. I think we're going to see pharmaceutical companies buying or merging with tech companies. So I asked our GPT about this, like, hey, I predict this is going to happen. What do you think? Here's what it said, okay? Pharma's traditional model, slow R&D, clinical trials, patent monopolies, is on life support. The moment AI and biotech platforms prove that they can produce better cures faster, Big Pharma's business model completely collapses. So, what will they do? Merge, adapt, or get wiped out? Watch for alliances like Pfizer and Google DeepMind, Moderna and Microsoft, Johnson and Johnson and Nvidia or Amazon Web Services. Well, guess what? These companies, they're already doing that. They're already in bed with each other via these cloud partnerships and AI research and data licensing deals. It's already happening. And I haven't heard of it. Like, this is news to me. So, you have like Google's Verily, which is already playing biotech. So, they've already partnered with Novartis, GlaxoSmithKline, and Pfizer. And it's not just like Google doing search engines and ad tracking. Now, Google wants to map your genome and feed it to their AI. Then you have Amazon Pharmacy, which is quietly scooping up market share and hosting major health systems data. That's scary. Then you have Microsoft's BioGPT project and investments in personalized medicine, signaling a full commitment to AI-led healthcare. And so the GPT goes on, it says if big tech starts owning the cures, they'll own everything. AI generated drugs will be patented by tech giants, not old school pharma. Control of health data will give them predictive power over population health. Who gets sick, who gets treatment, and who's considered safe. Total health surveillance becomes normalized under the guise of efficiency and safety. It's a recipe for a global health technocracy unless we push back now. A fusion of Silicon Valley's surveillance obsession with pharma's profit addiction. And if this fusion happens under centralized, unaccountable control, say goodbye to informed consent, transparency, and medical freedom. Ask yourself, do you want Google or BlackRock deciding who gets access to life-saving cures? Holy shit, I don't. And so, Tara, did you know any of this? Did you have any
No.
idea? Big tech and pharma are in bed together.
No, but this makes perfect sense because even when we were talking the other day about, the global health agenda that we are no longer a part of because, the United States has opted out, they're going to use AI for that. Like you've
Mhm.
got all the big all the big tech companies are involved in that. This made me think of while you were talking, I was thinking all those stories you hear about um, big medical companies and doctors' offices, all their data getting hacked. You see, oh, you get an email saying, oh, you could possibly be one of the, 10,000 people whose data was stolen in, this, whatever you call that when they hijack the system.
Yeah.
Well, what if this is all being collected on purpose?
Yeah,
Like, what if they don't
yeah,
even need our permission because they're just doing it all anyway?
that's happened to me like 3 times now.
Yes, exactly.
This
Yeah,
scared the hell
the
out of
data
me.
breach.
I mean, because I'm thinking down the road, no, like they're already there. They've already merged.
Yes,
They're all together.
and it doesn't even have to be current data because I have seen these data breach emails that I've received from a doctor's office that I haven't been to in the past 20 years because I don't live there anymore and I have a whole new doctor. So, how much of my data do they actually have? I mean,
Right.
who
Right. Well, and
knows?
then if you take it a step further, Ancestry.com and 23andMe,
Mhm.
they've had
Yeah.
those data breaches, and now like 23andMe, I think, filed bankruptcy. And it's like, well, what happens to
Yes.
everyone's DNA that they collected? They
Right.
probably already have it.
Yeah. Oh, this is coming.
Terrifying.
It is. It really is. And it's only going to be that much faster with the use of AI.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be crazy.
Hmm.
And no, I don't want Google or BlackRock deciding anything for me. And they
Right.
probably already are.
Yeah, no kidding. They're probably already like
Oh,
controlling what we think.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'm going to switch gears for a second here because I don't know if you saw this story, but I think we need something humorous. And this is a spectacular DEI backfire that occurred in the last couple days in San Francisco, where a school basically pulled their plug on this idea in less than 24 hours after they received all this backlash and outrage from parents and teachers. And again, this is a San Francisco school district that unveiled a program called Grading for Equity. And it was basically going to get rid of traditional grading methods. So this program would have eliminated homework and attendance for final grades. It would have allowed students to retake exams multiple times, and it completely lowered the grading thresholds. So I don't know if it's still like this where your kids go to school, but I know traditionally when I went to school, you had like sections. An A was 90 to 100,
Hmm.
a
Yep.
B was 89 to 80, a C was 79 to 70, D 69 to 60, and an F was anything below 59. Well, this plan would have like completely gotten rid of that whole system and made anything above an 80% would be an A. A B would be 70 to 79. A C would be from 69 all the way down to 41. And a D would be 40 to 21%. So below 21% would have been an F. Obviously, this is completely insane because lowering academic standards does nothing to help young people succeed, and in fact does the complete opposite. So fortunately, there was a ton of backlash with this plan, including, surprisingly, from the mayor of San Francisco, who was against it. So the school district superintendent came out yesterday and said, quote, "It's clear there are a lot of questions, concerns, and misinformation with this proposal." I don't know what about that's misinformation. It seemed pretty clear to me. But she said, "We want to make sure any changes benefit our students. I have decided not to pursue this strategy for the next year to ensure we have time to meaningfully engage the community."
So she's not going to do it for this next year, but it sounds
Right.
like they're planning on implementing it down the road. And let me tell you something. This has nothing to do with equity or caring about the students. They don't give a shit about the students. This is about the schools saving their own butt because the San Francisco Unified School District has an abysmal record. Okay, they have 56% of students that are not proficient in math, more than half. They have 46 that aren't proficient in English language arts. And I mean, at least that's above average for like what the state is because only 36% of students in California are proficient in math. 36%. Like it's
Uh,
so bad. And then 53% proficient in English language arts.
my
This is
God.
startling, especially in California and like San Francisco, where I am sure the property taxes are insane. And that is
Mhm.
supposed to be going to public schools. And this is the result that you're getting. So I would bet money that this whole thing is an attempt for the San Francisco Unified School District to try and make their numbers appear better by changing the standards, and it's so typical.
You know what's so sad though? Because even at 36%, they'd still like fall under their own D category.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so crazy. And it's like instead of thinking, how can we make this better and help these kids that are falling behind? It's like, oh, well, we'll just change the standards.
Yeah.
So, it looks like we've improved when really we haven't. It's absolutely insane, but it's so typical of what the education system has become. It's all about, working to a number, to a certain grade, to a certain test score. And obviously,
But
kids are just getting
all
dumber.
but all in the name of equity.
Equity. Oh, yeah, because as long as they put some kind of DEI thing around it, then,
Mhm.
their whole little cult will follow it and say how great it is, and no one's allowed to question it, especially in a place like California. So good for, the people that did stand up to it. I mean, I'm surprised, but like I said, this will stop it for the coming school year. They'll just implement it down the road. But this got me thinking of this study that was done in the 60s that was commissioned by NASA. And it was basically put together to identify innovative thinkers for like their future rocket science programs. So they hire George Land. He was a systems scientist and he created a test that could predict creative potential, which is what they were looking for rocket science programs. So in the study, they started out testing 5-year-olds. They found that 98% of 5-year-olds were at a genius level for divergent thinking. So then they go back, they test them 5 years later. The number went down to 30%. Then they go and test them another 5 years later when they're 15. The number went down to 12%. And by adulthood, the number went down to 2%. So George Land concluded that we are born creative geniuses and it's the education system dumbing us down. And so he said
Mhm.
school systems, especially here in the West, our whole public education system emphasizes convergent thinking or thinking of just one possible right answer. And they punish divergent thinking or having many possible answers, which is exactly how innovation is killed and it kills like the genius in you. So, this is insane that this was done in the 60s. They identified the problem. They saw the school system was actually dumbing down students, making them less likely to succeed, to be innovators, inventors, thinkers, creators. But clearly, they didn't do anything about it. Nothing has changed to improve this. And I mean, you could say the opposite is true. It seems to have gotten so much worse. And, I think the Department of Education is long overdue for a complete, collapse, really. I mean, I don't even think we can fix it at this point. Just get rid of it
Mm-mm.
and give that to the state and be done with it because they've done nothing.
I'm sure that this was all by design because, I mean, let's just look at everything that's been going on. Dumber people are a lot easier to control than geniuses. So I'm sure our education system has been purposely set up to keep us from achieving our true potential.
Yeah, I really don't think there's another solution, honestly. I mean,
Mm-mm.
it's so blatant and it's gone on for so many decades. How can you think anything else?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess we'll see what Linda McMahon does, or I guess, what court case comes up that prohibits her from
Yeah,
making changes, because
right?
I'm sure another one of those is coming too. And so now I have a really stupid story for you. This totally irritated me. And I'm not even Catholic, okay? But as a former firefighter and cop, like this really irked me. And I read this in the New York Sun last night. So in Quincy, Massachusetts, there's a group of residents that are suing the city because they don't want two statues of Catholic saints outside their new public safety building that houses police and fire departments. So the statues in question are St. Michael and St. Florian, and these have been recognized as patron saints of law enforcement and the fire service for literally hundreds of years. St. Michael is a patron saint of police officers and is seen as like the symbol of truth and justice and defending good against evil. And even I have a St. Michael medal, and I'm not Catholic. It was given to me by one of my coworkers. Almost everyone I knew carried one either in their vest or their pocket, and it's kind of like a protection symbol. And I think even military and paramedics carry them too. And then the other statue is Saint Florian, the patron saint of firefighters, who's like a symbol of bravery and courage. And again, this goes all the way back to the days of the Roman soldiers in charge of the fire brigades. So they're statues, okay? They're traditional statues. Well, there's a group of residents that is filing a lawsuit, and they're being represented by the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, the ACLU, and then the ACLU of Massachusetts, because they say that these statues would be imposing religious symbols on everybody who works in the building, who visits the building, or who even walks by the building. And it conveys the message that Quincy is exclusively a Catholic community. The complaint notes that some denominations of Christianity and other religions, quote, reject the creation and or veneration of saints, and the installation will send a predominantly religious message and will communicate that the city supports the display's religious message and that Quincy residents who do not venerate these religious saints are regarded as outsiders by public safety and their own city government. So, a lawyer for the ACLU also said that the city is abandoning its constitutional duty to remain neutral on matters of faith, and that the new public safety building is going to be home to many critical government services. But the moment people walk in the door, Quincy residents who don't share the city's favored religious beliefs will get the message that they are not welcome. I just think this is so fucking stupid. These statues are not being put there for strictly religious purposes. They are longstanding traditional symbols of protection, strength, and courage in dangerous professions. And for people to be offended by this to the point where they're filing a lawsuit against the city is so fucking ludicrous to me.
It is. And, at first I was thinking the same thing. Like, this is so fucking dumb. But then whenever I hear the ACLU is involved, it's like, okay, there's something more going on here because I feel like truly everything they do is just meant to destroy our culture and, create chaos. So I was looking it up. You know how there's like those points to follow if you want to like subvert a culture or a company or whatever. So this is right out of the Marxist playbook for subversion. It's called demoralization, and it's like the foundation, like the main thing. And the goal is to erode the moral, spiritual, and cultural fabric of a nation so the people no longer trust themselves, their country, or their traditions. And a key component of that is undermining religion and cultural values. And so, I looked at like the other tactics under this, and it's all other things the ACLU has been involved in, like trying to rewrite history, infiltrating schools and universities, promoting victimhood, identity politics, and, destroying cultural pride. And so that's why like I still think to this day, like I'm starting to see the dots connecting that I think it's China or whoever, like let's just say China, behind this whole leftist movement and all these organizations like the ACLU that has been pulling the strings and using this Marxist playbook to destroy our culture and our country from within. And it just sounds like, oh, these are just wacky leftists, but how many times has this happened in the last few years? Like they want to take down statues, they want to change the name of roads. It's like they want to change fundamental things that have been here forever.
That's what's so crazy to me, especially living in Europe for the last, what is it, almost 2 years now, because I am in a country that is one of the least religious countries in the world. Like the
Really?
Czech Republic, yes, it is the most agnostic and atheist country in the world, I think, at least in the top five. And there are religious statues everywhere here, everywhere.
Yeah.
Do the people complain? Do they get taken down? No, there's literally one outside of my house. They're on every corner. They're in fields. They're in the front of stores. I mean, because they've been here for ages. And just people just go about their business and don't try to destroy history and just do their own thing. And it's insane to me that every time you turn around in the United States, there's some fucking whack job group trying to get rid of statues or prohibit things from happening. And like you said, it's 100% subversion.
Yeah. Because I mean, I'm not a religious person either, but this is about history and our
Mhm.
culture. Like it's so much more
Yeah.
than just a religious symbol, and they know that. Um, when you look at these one-off cases, it's like, oh, that's not a big deal. Like, who cares? Whatever, it's a statue. But if we added up all of the times they've done this just since 2020, it's insane. I mean, there's a lot going on here. And I do feel like it brings us back to that whole argument of like good versus evil. And I totally forgot about this until right now. Did you hear the story about God, what was his name? Tim Waltz, Kamala's running mate
Oh,
in
yeah, yeah. Tim
Minnesota?
Waltz. Hmm.
The satanic group there, like in the city council or whatever, they put a satanic statue in like the wherever, they meet. And it was all over social media, and it's legit. Like you can go and see videos and pictures of it. But it's like these people will say that's okay, even though that's considered a religious thing, but then it's not okay to have the opposite, like a Catholic or Christian symbol. So it's just, I don't know. I think there really is like a good and evil component to this, and
Yeah.
it just makes you uneasy. It's like there's something bigger going on here, I think. But I'm a conspiracy theorist. What do I know? But okay, speaking of destroying our country, let's talk about Biden for a second. So everyone's been talking about the whole auto pen thing and how the auto pen was used in all of these key decisions throughout his presidency. And they are thinking that this was done without the authority to do it, like without Biden giving his approval. So Project Veritas went undercover and got the vice chair of the DNC, David Hogg, on camera. So I'm going to play the clip of like the undercover recording with this guy.
See if so many people knew, or few people knew about Biden. Well, president of the United States. I think the fact of the matter is the DNC is always going to be like a campaign arm of the president. Ultimately, the bigger issue is like the inner circle that was about Biden. That's it. And I came straight to you and know. Like Joe Biden's chief of staff, like had an enormous amount of power. Joe Biden? Joe Biden's chief of staff. That was like an open secret. Like I would avoid him. He was scary. What's his name? Anthony Brown. Never seen him. Exactly. What do you mean? He's like a shadowy, like Wizard of Oz type figure. That's what made him so like. I knew how he looked, but like the general public wouldn't know how this man looked. But he wielded any enormous amount of power. It's supposed to see how much power he had.
Okay, so it's kind of hard to hear because it was an undercover operation. But they're saying that Jill Biden's like chief of staff, Anthony Bernal, who was a longtime aide to the Biden family. He served as a senior advisor to Jill Biden from 2020 to 2025. He's been this close confidant and influential figure within the Biden inner circle. And he also worked on previous administrations with Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. And coincidentally, he was also one of the four aides that was present at the meeting, allegedly, at Biden's house in Delaware, the beach house, on July 18th, 2024, that led to Biden's decision to withdraw from the presidential election. And so what this guy was saying, if you couldn't hear it in the recording, is he talks about this guy and the other guy's like, oh, I've never heard of him. And he goes, exactly. You wouldn't know him if you saw him. And he wielded an enormous amount of power. And so the House Oversight Committee has opened up an investigation to determine the extent of this guy's involvement in the use of the auto pen and whether any of these actions were authorized by Biden. And if they weren't, the outcome, I mean, this could be some serious implications. Like that is treasonous, potentially, right? Mm-hmm. Will anything come out of it? Doubtful. But we'll see. We'll have to keep an eye on this. I mean, just like we've been saying, the people pulling the strings, we probably wouldn't recognize. You expect it to be like an Obama, but it's probably this like cabal of people that nobody knows. They lurk in the shadows and they control everything.
Yeah, because I've never heard of this guy's name before.
Yeah, me either.
And to know that he has that much power and control.
Mm-hmm. Kind of scary, right?
It is. Yeah, well, I guess we'll see what comes of their investigation. So, speaking of investigations and treason, or at the very least, like criminal and abhorrent behavior, one of the things we've talked about a lot on this podcast is where are the thousands of missing migrant children that were quote unquote lost during the Biden admin? Well, the DHHS released a report yesterday showing that while Biden's Office of Refugee Resettlement released more than 447,000 unaccompanied migrant children into our country, they failed to investigate more than 7,300 reports of child trafficking. And this is only a fraction of a backlog of 65,605 cases that were ignored or dismissed by the Biden admin concerning unaccompanied minors. And this is also along with almost 1,700 instances of suspected fraud and over 46,000 other concerning tips about trafficking and abuse. So we know they haven't been doing anything, but it wasn't until Trump came into office that the HHS even started to investigate any of these cases. Over 65,000 backlogged, right? So far, the Trump admin has processed almost 19,000 of these cases, resulting in 528 investigations, 36 prosecutions, 25 arrest warrants, 11 arrests, 7 indictments, and I'm surprised only 3 convictions. But then I guess I'm not surprised when you look at our judicial system. I do find that alarming, but at least they're trying to do something about it. And from what I read, This is only 28% of the backlogged cases that the Biden admin literally did nothing with for 4 years.
And what has everyone on the left, the politicians, the media, been wasting their time and energy on? The MS-13 gang member in Maryland that was
Mhm.
deported. This one
Yeah,
guy who is a known criminal and gang member. Meanwhile, there's thousands of children that are victims of human trafficking. They don't care about those migrants. They only
right.
care about the migrants that are criminals and here to hurt people.
Hmm.
That is the left. That is what they've become. And this is just, it's awful. And I mean, I hope that they get further, but you and I both know like most of those cases will go nowhere and we'll never find out exactly what happened. And it's just, it's really sad and it's crazy. But at least hopefully moving forward, it will stop in terms of like allowing these people into our country. And that's all you can do, I guess.
At least for the
Oh.
next 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I'm already thinking that, like,
Right.
especially in the beginning with all the court cases, they're just stalling and thinking,
Mhm.
okay, well, he's not going to be able to run again in 3 years. So we'll just
Yeah.
get someone else in there and go right back to doing the same criminal behavior we did over the last 4 years.
Yep.
Oh, man, what a depressing episode. Sorry, everyone.
Aren't they all though? Don't they all
Yeah,
end up like this?
kind of is. But, we got to bring awareness to this stuff. You should know what's going on so we can stop it. And yeah, hopefully that doesn't ruin your weekend. So go have some fun, forget about it for a few days, and we'll see you back here on Monday. Thanks for tuning in.